I'll say a few words of self-introduction. I'm Aluf Benn. I've been a journalist with Haaretz for 36 years. And before that with Haaretz, there was a kind of weekly affiliate of Haaretz in the Tel Aviv area. As writer, I covered the diplomatic beat, which in Israel is a triangle of war, peace, and politics, and diplomacy. During the peace process, and when Dan Meridor mentioned the Camp David conference, I was there with him covering it from the outside. I was there when Ehud Barak declared there was no partner for peace, a very sad moment. And then in the current job, it's my 15th year as editor-in-chief, where we have a dual mission. One, like any other newspaper, news organization, they call it today editor around the world. The shift from this to this has profoundly changed our profession. And you always need to keep up because there's some new technology, some new social networks, now it's AI. You must keep up in order to be relevant to a younger generation and even to the more veteran readers. We all have iPhones. And the other issue is the specific, particular, and I say proud journalistic mission of Haaretz as the voice of liberals and progressives within Israel who support democracy, human rights, civil rights, and in the context of the Israeli-Arab conflict. We have been, for years, the only ones who reported about the abuses of Israeli occupation in the West Bank and Gaza. And in the past 2 years, we have been the only ones reporting, not from the ground, we don't have reporters in Gaza, but reporting on what's happening in Gaza. We talk to Palestinians, we rely on international media, but the rest of the Israeli, at least the Israeli Hebrew media, the media catering them for the majority of Hebrew speakers in Israel, shies away from it. They barely report what's going on in Gaza. To the extent they do it, it's through the framing of some anti-Semitic propaganda spread by hostile media around the world to support Hamas. We don't think it's the case. We think that if you cover a war, and I'm saying it now professionally, even before talking about politics or ideals, professionally, when you cover a war, you have to tell what's going on either side and not just portray a unilateral portrait of the war. And most of the Israeli media is simply self-censoring itself. It's not because of government pressure. There has been government pressure on Haaretz. They threatened us with boycott. We keep on doing what we're doing, and we feel it's important. It's it's the most challenging. Professionally, it's obviously the most challenging period for anybody covering it, and for me as well. And this is where we are today. So, just ask me anything.
The reality in Israel since October 7 is that a lot of the people moved to the right.
Yes.
And there was a lot of loss of trust in the Palestinians, etc. Now also given what Dan Meridor said, that the Oslo talks failed because they wanted to go back to 48, not to 67. So my question is, why does what's considered the left, why doesn't the left, why can't the left relate more to the fears of a lot of Israelis, even those who were on the left and moved right? Why? It's really a PR and branding issue, but I think it's crucial that to connect with the fears of Israelis, and like even using the concept of two-state is very challenging for a lot of Israelis to understand that it's not realistic. So why can't the left
position it more like acknowledge the fears, acknowledge the difficulties, acknowledge the challenges that a lot of Palestinians really want to go back to 48, but we want to go back to 67. Why can't we be more astute in terms of PR?
Well, I think it runs deeper than PR. I agree with you that most important challenge, not just to the left. You can call it the left. You can call it the camp of change. You can call it the anti-Netanyahu. You can call it opposition. You can call it by any name. Its main challenge since October 7 is the fact that the majority of Jewish Israelis support the war in Gaza and support what they see in Gaza, and according to polls, also support the expulsion of Palestinians from there. And clearly, it's a challenge to speak the other way. Now, I'm not a political leader. I'm not running for election. But I think and I don't think that the left ignores the fear of Israeli Jews after what happened on October 7. But I think that first, and that's why the leader of the left is Yair Golan, who is here, was not exactly, he did not spend his life as a social worker, community organizer, or delivering flowers in Gaza. He was a fighter, and he rose almost to the top rank in the IDF. And even on October 7, he went on. He had no arms. He went on to his old base, got an M16, and went to save lives. So I think this is. Well, people on the right, clearly they have, on the Netanyahu camp, they want to delegitimize everybody. They call him extreme left, and they call Naftali Bennett was, just remember, a decade ago, Naftali Bennett was the Ben Gvir and Smotrich, outflanking Netanyahu from the right. And so was Lieberman. And so was Arik Sharon back in the days with Netanyahu and Shamir. But they call Bennett leftist and traitor as well. It doesn't matter what they call. But I think the main challenge for those who want to replace and succeed Netanyahu is to find a unifying vision beyond just caring for democracy and for the state institution and for the independence of the judiciary or the independent opinion of the military that are under attack. And I do think that that's, personally, the two-state solution may not happen tomorrow, but it's the least bad alternative for coexistence, as long as it's it's wrapped with the security arrangements and so on. And my my control group here is that Israel has been fighting in Gaza for 2 years. Israel fought in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iran, now in Qatar. And one of those forces in the Arab world that cooperated throughout that period with Israel on security has been the Palestinian Authority. There are a lot of security issues in the West Bank. There is a camp by the far right to drive out Palestinians from what is called Area C and concentrate them in the larger Palestinian towns and take hold and grab more land. But even under that, the Palestinian Authority still cooperates with Israel. Does it mean that Palestinians forgot about 1948? No, you can't say that. When I entered the hall, I saw on the walls, I don't know if that's kind of I know that's that way in Australia, I don't know if that's the way in Canada, recalling the native nations that were here before Canada. So that happened, I don't know, 300-400 years ago. People don't forget, but it doesn't mean they can't coexist. The idea that the new generation of Palestinians would just wake up one day and forget about 1948, that is not going to happen. I think, and I wrote it in the past, that the Jews in Israel should have better understanding of what happened in 1948, because then otherwise it would be more difficult for them to understand the other side. But that's besides the point. Camp David failed for many reasons, but I think the main one was that Ehud Barak, with all his daring, did not have enough public support on the way there. His coalition collapsed way before, and Clinton was already on the way out, and Arafat was not in any mood to compromise, and that's why it failed, and it's a tragedy.
Carol Alden. I just wanted to
express gratitude on behalf of all of us for you being here and for Haaretz and the heroic journalism in general and over the last couple of years. I think you've given so many of us in the diaspora community.
And you live here in Toronto?
I live here in Toronto. I have Israeli citizenship, and I'm organized the Canadian Friends of Standing Together here in Toronto and across Canada. I think Haaretz has given many of us a way to still feel connected to the people on the land and to see the Israel that we're fighting for. So I just wanted to thank you very much for all of your work with that. I did also want to ask you about something you didn't ask to Dan Meridor, and it speaks to this issue of 1948. I felt like a lot of his focus was, we need to get kind of back on track and kind of go back to these halcyon days of Zionism, which to me seems quite misguided, and like going back to that road is exactly what's going to get us here again. And to me, from Standing Together's perspective, it's about, moving forward a new political, and I kind of wish you had taken him to task on that, because I think it fed in, can I just finish one more thing? I think it fed into his other response about why the Olmert deal failed, and this whole thing about, they can't get over 48, and exactly what you were speaking about, which is going back to those days of Zionism is not understanding or having a misguided interpretation of the history and not realizing the impact that it had on the Palestinians.
Well, clearly, if you'd ask, I won't say any, but many of the Israeli Palestinian citizens about 48, to them it's not a moment of greatness, but a disaster, a Nakba. And look, I belong to a very small group of people who believe in the need to create an Israeli identity that is more egalitarian and that could include Jews and not Jews together. And but it's as you mentioned, it was a hard sell before October 7, and it's even a harder sell today. When the Supreme Court in Israel, you have the Ministry of Interior has a nationality. So I think they recognize 134 or 135 different nationalities in your registration, your personal registration there. The most unique nationalities exist, without one Israeli. So people appealed to the Supreme Court years ago in those, glory days of a very liberal Supreme Court, asking the Ministry of Interior to write their nationality as Israeli in their ID documents. And the court said no. And the court said no because, as they said, after 65 years, we're still lacking evidence that such a nation even exists. And before that, again, Justice Agranat, one of the legendary legal minds in Israel, the man who brought civil rights and freedom of the press to Israel. It was not in the law. It was enshrined by his ruling in 1953, Kol Ha'am. And even Agranat said, if we declare that there is such a thing as Israeli, how can we reach out to what would be our unity with our Jewish brothers and sisters in the diaspora? So it's what you said, and standing together definitely is one of the most visible and daring opposition and protest groups in Israel. And they actually try to reach out and be that kind of egalitarian organization. But it's a hard sell.
So it's still the case? There is no Israeli nationality?
No. There is Israeli citizenship, but when you say what is your nation, you can be Jewish, you can be Arab, you can be Druze, you can be Abkhazi, I think, you can be Assyrian, and even Tuvalu, but not Israeli.
I want to ask you a question in your journalistic, from your journalistic perspective, rather than policy. The voice of Palestinian Israelis. Where do they get their news? How are they expressing themselves? Is there no daily? We know there's no daily paper, right? And what's Haaretz's role in giving voice to the Israeli Palestinians, Israeli Arabs, whatever you want to call them, which they don't have right now?
Well, they don't. Well,
so where is their voice, and how can we hear it?
Well, first of all, they have. Well, there are several radio stations and news channels and online channels serving that community. Be it Panet, that is more commercial, or Radio Nas or Radio Shams. There are. They don't have a newspaper, but there was never the only the daily newspapers or newspapers in Arabic in Israel were belong either to political parties or to the government. But that was years ago. Look, what we did in Israel for many years, Amos Shokin, our publisher, used to tease us and ask, how come we don't have Arab reporters? And he said, not just covering. We had one or two covering Israeli Arab affairs. He said, no, not just covering their own community, but covering sports and business and what have you. And several years ago, we launched a project called Haaretz 21. And then we analyzed the situation. The situation is that most newsrooms in Israel are manned by especially at the editorial editing level and production level, by people who graduated from IDF Radio. Because this is the biggest journalism school in Israel, where you get people when they're 22 with 4 years of experience, having the entire government senior echelon in their Rolodex, the cell phone, etc. So if you want to, and those people who don't serve in the military, like ultra-Orthodox or Arab, they cannot pass the bar because they miss all that experience. So we realized that we need to recruit actively. We did it several years before. I started in the opinion section to have Arab opinion writers. But then we launched this class or special course for people from the Arab society, and we reached out actively. We found people on Facebook with writing good posts, etc. And I think 20 people attended that seminar, and we eventually recruited 5 or 6 for full-time positions. And if you sort of and then it went on organically. Because what we call a friend brings a friend. But then when people see that the glass or concrete ceiling is broken, they are more daring and have more initiative. And if you saw, one of them appeared on the video. Naram, who covers the Middle East for our English language editorial staff, and she did a lot of reporting from Gaza, calling people there. So when the war came, this became an invaluable asset for us, because we had a group of Arabic speakers who have not been trained by intelligence or by the security service to interrogate Palestinians, but they are Palestinians themselves, so they had way more access and ability to cover the story. We have one reporter, Shireen, who, besides covering Gaza, she covers Arabic culture for us throughout the Arab world. So we have these voices. In tomorrow's paper, we have an op-ed by Ahmed Tibi. I'm an Oda's partner in leading Hadash Ta'al. So if you read Haaretz, you hear these voices. Not so much in mainstream media, where they have in Channel 12, the most important media, on Friday night in their main news roundtable, which again, it's Friday night, so all the religious viewers are not there. So they had Muhammad Majadle, whose cousin actually writes for us, Hanin Majadle, and they took him off the screen. Once the war began, he was taken off the panel. Because they didn't want to hear what he had to say. But at the same time, on Channel 11, the public broadcaster, their diplomatic correspondent, is a Palestinian, not even from Israel per se, from East Jerusalem, whose father was a truck driver or something like that, and he struggled his way to become a very front person in the public broadcaster. So it's happening. Too slow and too little, in my opinion. But once we decided to do that, so you can say Haaretz 21 was a great success. You can criticize it by saying why Haaretz 21 and not 20, 19, 17. I don't know. We both are right. We have an Arab section in our website. we might, well, it's easier said than done. Investing in media is not the best investment these days, and so we might expand it in a way. But I don't believe that we launch a full-scale, not newspaper, but even a news site in Arabic.
I have the microphone. Hi, Amy Matchin. I lived half my life here, half my life in Israel. Two related questions. One is, are you concerned about the integrity of any upcoming elections? And the second is, what do you think of the idea of recruiting Israelis abroad who have the right to vote in Israel to return in order to vote?
Well, I'm worried about the integrity of the elections. We just published today an investigative story about how a network of bots using AI and so on and fake identities is built in Israel in the exact same model that was used in Romania several years ago to twist the election. But I must tell you, and I wrote an op-ed about it. I'm no less worried about Netanyahu winning the election legitimately and therefore gaining more legitimacy for moving full speed ahead or double speed ahead with his plan for autocracy and theocracy. And part of that relates to your second question, and part of that is, there is no exact number, but let's say a ballpark number of 100,000 Israelis who have left since the last election. Most of them, I know about 10 families like that. And I think only one came back from sabbatical. And these people who belong to the liberal side of Israel, and these people escaped not just because of the war, but also because of the fear for their ability to live their liberal lifestyle in a country that's becoming more and more religious and more nationalist. And that might be a big help to the Netanyahu base, which is demographically growing much faster. And so if these people, or some of them, come back to vote, it might make a lot of difference.
I've got the mic here.
Maybe you just pass it among each other so that I don't have to be the nasty judge denying the rights.
Okay. I just want you to address the lack of imagery on media in Israel when it comes to the major networks of what's going on in Gaza. And I think you tried to raise that with Dan Maridor, and he kind of deflected the question.
Well, he's not the editor of Channel 12, so...
That's true. But how do you think it would affect the Israeli opinion if there were real images of what's going on in Gaza right now?
Well, first of all, the decision not to air from Gaza is totally the decision of the editors or managers or executives in the main TV channels. So we have Channel 14 that is Fox News, Bibi's channel. But we have the public broadcaster, 11, and we have 12, which is the mainstream, and 13. And they refrain from doing so. When you ask them, they say that the public doesn't want to know, that they might have problem with their viewers, that their viewers might flock to Channel 14, there was a leaked WhatsApp conversation among some of the editors and reporters of Channel 12 about reporting, I don't remember which event in Gaza. And the editor was saying no, move on to the next thing. We really don't need to hear about that. So to the extent that they are broadcasting about Gaza, it's framed in two ways. One is occasional videos of Palestinians saying bad things and bad-mouthing Hamas, and the other is through quoting from the foreign media and Western media, But then it's always with the undertone that, you know, these are anti-Semites and it's just Hamas propaganda. And that was especially evident when there were news about starvation, and which were denied by the Israeli government, who said it's all Hamas propaganda. And then they found this poor kid was sick, not only starving, but also sick, as if sick children don't deserve to eat. Or in that case, I think he even needed special diet which you couldn't get. And we were the only ones reporting about that, not just quoting from foreign media, but also calling people in Gaza, giving videos and video interviews with medical professionals trying to save people suffering from malnutrition in Gaza. We got some heat about it, but I think it was one of the most important contributions of us to the coverage. What would have happened if this would aired on Channel 12? Some people would be appalled and worried about the morality of Israeli actions. Others might be, you know, happy about it because, you know, the thinking that the Palestinians deserve whatever they're getting because they started it. They assaulted Israel on October 7. They murdered, they raped, they looted, they massacred, and therefore they had it coming. So Israel bears no more responsibility to whatever is happening, all the way to driving them out of Gaza to South Sudan and Ethiopia.
So you were at Camp David, right?
Yes.
There's a legend that I want you could help with. The story is that the Secretary of State, whatever her name was,
Madeleine Albright.
yes, that at the evening where the signature was supposed to happen, Barak got cold feet and would not come out from his room to go. And she went and she banged on his door forever and said, come.
No, you're
And
mixing.
he never did.
You're mixing two other stories. One is about Barak's failure to reach peace with Syria. There was negotiation when it just began, and everybody expected Barak to cut the final deal with President Hafez Assad at the time, arguing that Assad was sick and dying, but he still had the authority to make peace with Israel, and that there was one meeting at the Blair House, and then came the Shepherdstown Peace Conference. And on the way there, we were flying with the Barak, the traveling press, and they kept us waiting on the tarmac for about an hour. The plane landed, and we were just locked in. We had no idea what was going on. And it took a year when only after the administration ended and some officials wrote, including Clinton, wrote their memoirs, said that Barak came and told the American officials that he was not going to get off the plane because there is no majority in Israel for that deal. So he just wants to call it off. And Clinton wrote retrospectively, I was furious to say the least. Now we were on that plane. Several rows, it was a small Boeing 707, not the wings of Zion that now Netanyahu has. We were, 10 rows back. We had no idea what was going on. And my colleague Raviv Drucker was telling me later, you see, we believe that we need to be on the spot and cover the story. We were on the plane, 3 meters away. We had no idea what was going on. And eventually Barak was convinced to go off the plane, and the conference convened in Shepherdstown, but it dispersed after 10 days and nothing came out of it. The other story was that after the failure of Camp David, they decided to keep negotiating. And then the second intifada erupted after Sharon, the Ben-Gvir of the time, came to Temple Mount, to Al-Aqsa, and the Palestinians revolted. And the Americans were trying, and the French were trying to save the day. So President Chirac called an emergency conference in Paris with Madeleine Albright, Barak, and Arafat. So we came, and they met at the residence of the American ambassador to Paris. And Arafat wanted to leave. So Madeleine Albright had the guards lock the door, lock the gates, and force him to stay there. Well, that didn't help either. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I want to go back to today and talking a little bit about the the control that the government is gaining over the police, and now with Zini probably becoming the head of Shabak also. And we are hearing more and more ministers and members of parliament that say that they will not obey Supreme Court decisions. So with that kind of a trend that is happening, are you worried that at the end of the day, there will not be a choice if you wanted to keep Israel democratic from some kind of a violent clash between the two groups?
No, I don't support violence of any kind. I don't support violence of any kind, and I think it's a wrong way to go. I think we should fight for democracy, and again, we can debate to what extent Israel was really a full democracy with the occupation and all that, but even to the extent that that democracy and civil rights existed in Green Line Israel, we need to fight to gain it back, but not with violence. And clearly, one of the main thrusts of the Netanyahu government, besides the destruction of Gaza, and to some extent even more important to them, is the destruction and diminishing of any independent authority that has any rule in the Israeli system. And in that respect, October 7 was a boost. Why? Because for many years, by the way, that was also the argument from the left for many years, not just the right, the military had enormous clout in Israeli policymaking over war and peace. And whenever the chief of staff, any chief of staff, had a clash with the defense minister, the public always sided with the uniformed person rather than the politician. Now, when you look at Netanyahu's entire political career is a long fight against the military establishment created by the Labour Party. Most of his political rivals were, Yitzhak Rabin, Arik Sharon, Ehud Barak, Yair Golan, Benny Gantz. Now, even those among them whom he tried to recruit as defense ministers or coalition partners eventually had, he kicked them out. From Yitzhak Mordechai all the way to Yoav Gallant in this cabinet. Gallant was a groupie of Netanyahu. He went to his trial wearing the COVID mask and applauding like everybody else, and then became a bitter rival. October 7 and the dismal, unbelievable failure of the military and intelligence on that day enabled Netanyahu to weaken the position of military and of the intelligence community in decision making, and eventually kicked out Gallant, and he kicked out the security Ronen Bar and the chief of staff Halevi, and the chief of military intelligence Haliva left on his own device. So that cleared the ground for Netanyahu to appoint his own people. And guess what? He nominated Eyal Zamir, was his military advisor several years ago as chief of staff. And almost after an hour, Zamir became the new target for government abuse and ministerial abuse, and he veiled, but thinly veiled, threatened to resign. But they said, "Okay, go. We'll appoint someone else." And Zini, the new nominated head of the security service, is a Messianic student of the most extreme rabbis in the West Bank settlement, Rabbi Tau and his ilk. And his wife wrote a book supporting atrocities in Gaza. His brother is heading a team of volunteers raising houses in Gaza. And clearly, Zini is more, and Zini said that you must commit, first of all, you're committed to the prime minister who is your boss rather than to the rule of law. Clearly, this is a very scary development that couldn't have happened if not the backbone of these services was broken by their failure of October 7. And now Netanyahu is using that to strengthen his own power. And I must say that most reports about Zini were about the fear of his undermining democracy in Israel and civil rights. But just guess what the service under him can do to the Palestinians that are more of a target of the security service than the Jewish society in Israel. So that's a very scary development.
Jack Cunningham, good to see you
Hi,
again.
Jack. Yeah, welcome.
I wanted to follow up on a comment you made the first conversation we ever had about a month ago in Tel Aviv, and you said that those forces that are the broadly liberal side of the Israeli political spectrum, those who are opposed to the government, aren't offering much by way of a coherent alternative. They're better at saying what they're against than what they're for. You said if they get in, it'll probably be under a general who will be able to say, I have security credentials and can make peace and so on. But if the public, as it is likely to do, presses, what do you think an alternative stance would be in terms of security, and particularly in terms of Gaza, assuming, as is quite conceivable, that that conflict has not ended by the time of the next elections?
Well, just as I asked Dan Meridor earlier, what would be the vision? I think that one of the main problem of the non-Netanyahu camp is the lack of a unifying vision, because you have people there who are extreme right-wingers like Bennett and Lieberman, whose problem with Netanyahu is more personal and regarding his personality cult and leadership style, and autocratic tendencies than anything, than his policy. I don't think they oppose what they see in Gaza, and if they do, they hide it. Then you have people like Gantz and Lapid, who have different ways of looking at it, and Golan, and then you have the Arab parties, Mansour Abbas and Hadash Ta'al, obviously oppose whatever the Zionist parties call security. So it's very difficult to unify that camp. And Netanyahu, who has a knack for breaking apart opposition parties, could definitely use that in an election. And not only that, there's Yossi Cohen, the former Mossad chief, who wants to run independently to be the prime minister, but that carries the risk of him stealing the votes, as Moshe Kachlon did in 2015, stealing votes from the non-Bibi and joining his coalition. But it's difficult to find that unifying vision beyond, stopping the road to autocracy. And in Gaza, I think the moderate proposal is to have some sort of a combination resembling the Palestinian Authority that cooperates with Israel on security and involved in the rebuilding of Gaza and trying to make a change there. Is it going to be easy? No, it's a very long process. It's not going to change life tomorrow. Yeah, 5 more minutes.
Yeah, I think, and tell me if you agree or not, but there's a clear process to stop that, and that is the Kahanism was banned from the Knesset. The policies of Kahanism are revered, those parties. We're not talking just about individuals, but those parties. Why is that not in place today? So it's the policies that Netanyahu is using of Kahanism, which is destroying Israel's democracy.
Because Netanyahu for years tried to stay away from the Kahanists, but in the last election, he realized that the trigger for the rise of Kahanism was 2021, what we call the Shomer Chomot. I don't remember the English name of that thing, and that was when Ben Gvir opened an office in East Jerusalem. There were Palestinian protests. Hamas launched rockets for the first time at Jerusalem. And then there were violent clashes in the mixed towns, in Acre, in Jaffa, in Lida, with some Jews killed, with Palestinian lynched in Bat Yam. And that raised the fear of civil war within Israel. And Ben Gvir came back strengthened and said, let me take care of the police. I will know how to handle them. It's the time for Ben Gvir. And before the last election, Netanyahu realized that this is deeply rooted within Israeli society, so that Ben Gvir, rather than a nuisance, could be the USP, could be the winning card for the right-wing coalition. So he gave space for Ben Gvir's campaign, and then united with him. And then I don't see the difference today between Likud, Ben Gvir, and Smotrich in terms of ideology and policy. About half the members of the Likud faction in the Knesset say the same exact things as Ben Gvir and Smotrich. And they try to, and they portray Netanyahu as the moderate. So there's no big difference today, as used to be. So banning Kahanism means to ban the coalition. Kahanism is now the official ideology of the Israeli government.
How can it be banned in 1985 and not banned in 2002?
Because in 1985 it was isolated. It was a small majority. In 1994, after the Hebron massacre of Baruch Goldstein, Ben Gvir's idol, then it was also the Kahana movement was declared, Kach and Kahana Chai were declared terrorist organizations. But you cannot win against the majority. And that event in 2021, you cannot underestimate its effect on the Jewish public opinion in Israel, to the extent that when you read some of the pre-war warnings about what would happen if there's another war, led mainly by ex-general Yitzhak Brick, a war hero of '73, who was like the whistleblower on military failures in Israel for years. His main warning was about the revolt of Palestinians within Israel, which again didn't happen. Coexistence continues. There was a crackdown on Palestinian protests in Israel, on freedom of expression. People were detained for Facebook posts and tweets, and on that it was not just Netanyahu. The Attorney General and totally cooperated with that. But overall, life continues. I think we're running out of time.
Are you worried for the future of Haaretz and of freedom of press in Israel? And what do you think?
I'm worried, and we're fighting to keep it every day, to sell more subscriptions, to be more relevant and more interesting to our readers, not just on Gaza, but also in games and cultural stories. Less so in the English edition, which is more focused on war and peace. Naturally, Hebrew language culture is alien to most of our readers in the global arena, but yes, I'm worried, and they're threatening it publicly. I don't need to be inventing anything. Minister of Communications Kari would like to see us all locked up.
Hi, I'm Bob Cates with the Canadian Friends of Peace Now, and of course, our raison d'etre is a two-state solution. What do you think would have to happen to bring about a two-state solution, if it is, in your mind, possible?
Like all previous peace treaties, not just in the Middle East or in Israel, but in the entire world, war fatigue. Unfortunately, because I'm old enough, I'm 60, I'm old enough to remember as a kid the Yom Kippur War and its devastation. Remember, in 3 weeks, Israel lost many more people than it had lost in the 2 years of its longest war now. And there was economic devastation, international isolation. And then, as Dan Meridor recalled, Begin came and made peace with Egypt. And it passed because people were fatigued. They did not want to go to another war. And usually that precedes peace. And the tragedy of Camp David was that it was surpassed by the Second Intifada, which cost lots of lives on both sides. And that ended in the Gaza disengagement, but that wasn't peace. We supported it. Now the bon ton in Israel is to say that the Gaza disengagement was wrong. No, it was not wrong, but it was mishandled. And there were those people, like Akiva Eldar, my colleague at Haaretz, who used to write all the time that Sharon was making a big mistake or deliberately not engaging the Palestinian Authority in the taking over Gaza, and that unilateralism would eventually explode in our faces, which unfortunately has happened and is still happening to this day.
And ramping up settlements in the West Bank at the same time.
Yes, and that never stopped. That never stopped, and it only became more aggressive and violent under the Netanyahu-Smotrich government.
Is there...
Yeah, I think we're running out of time.
One super quick, is there anything that Western governments, in your opinion, could do that can be helpful to the progressive cause?
To show the progressives that they're not alone. It's important because remember the main tailwind for the Netanyahu government today is Donald Trump, with his full support for whatever Israel is doing. It's not new. Well, you know, Netanyahu is trying to show that Biden was in position and embargoed Israel. This is nonsense. Historically, since 1948, the U.S. successive administrations have given Israel quite a free hand on the Palestinian side and exerted more control over Israeli moves in the wider Middle East. Just like now, the same Trump called Israel to turn back its planes when they were on the way to go on toppling the regime in Iran, quote unquote, and Israel obeyed. But in Gaza, it's carte blanche. And so it's more difficult for the liberal governments to show their support and not appear to be anti-Israel and so on.
Is Connie's statement helpful about saying that he's going to recognize a Palestinian state?
Well, we at Haaretz support it, but we're in minority, as we said. Thank you all. Time for lunch.